In this tutorial, we'll develop a rule for the basis of a kitchen. Before developing the rule, we should organize the information required for the rule. That would be the questions that the rule must place and the definition of the typologies required. Then we'll move on to the real development of the rule. The questions or variants. We have set a variant for this type of frame. The type of frames may be different. Day frame, frames for ovens, frames for bases with doors, frames for bases with sinks, etc. We may extend this type. Similarly, we'll have several types of fronts. Day front, front with doors, front with drawers, with 2, with 4, with 6 drawers, front with doors and a drawer, and so on. We will have the possibility to decide the height of the plinth, whether to insert it or not, whether to manage the base on the ground or as hanging. Then we will define the data concerning the top, whether to have a top or not, and its thickness. Then we move on to the materials. Obviously, the structure will have its material. The same is for the front. When they are fronts, inserting knobs and handles is required. Last, we'll define the material for the plinth and for the top. Obviously, it's about a rather limited system, but the purpose of the tutorial is to explain the concept, and it won't be hard to extend to the real thing. There is a thing to explain here. Actually, the top is an element that is merged to several bases. Then we'll see how to merge it. We'll describe the concept of the top and its manufacturing concept. Let's move on to TreeCAD and see the work we have set on the variants. Let's speed up this phase, or this tutorial will be unnecessarily long. The fronts carry a list of entries, code, description to denote open front, front with 1 door, 2 doors, glass door, drawers. Based on needs, it's obviously possible to extend this variant. Then we'll see how to apply these information to the rule. The same thing for the structure. Even here we have inserted 6 types of structures to later pass to the structural variants, which are tops as follow. Top of 10, top of 40, or absence of a top. Here we have inserted other columns in the variant. A column to indicate the thickness, a column to indicate the material of the base, a column for a hypothetical price factor, and a column for the item code, etc., with a series of information. We can do the same thing here for the plinths. We have standard plinths, without plinths, hanging units, and bases with exposed plinths. Lastly, let's see the variants pertaining to the materials. Here we have done something particular. You can see it here on the alias codes. That is, all of the variants are actually the same variant instance over and over again. This is the colors variant. We have used it on STR to show the color of the structure. Here is the type of basic material. We'll later see how it will be. It's practically needed for the production. Here's the style of the material. We'll specify wood with 2 and the lacquered with 1. In the catalog, we will focus our attention on the lacquering. Here is the image of the material. These images of the materials are the ones that we have already copied inside the folder. Therefore, we already have them available. There is here a system for the organization. It's interesting to verify the content of this variant class. Actually, in the variant class, different information is inserted which are linked to the way the variant has to be represented. In this case, the variant class that begins with this digit reports. We want 3 lines and 3 columns with dimensions 120 by 120. The material is found in column 6. As specified here, it actually goes to the subfolder photo/genetic. The folder number 7 shows the arrangement in this case. There are a series of parameters that may be described more genetically, but usually this is the use of this variant. It's pretty complex, but it's useful to carry it in various situations. If we open the variance fronts finish at this point, we see that on the repetition of the variance structure color, nothing has absolutely changed. We may specify different defaults. Actually, all we have is the copy of the very same variant. At last, we see the handles variant and its manufacturing. Here, we just have a list of handles. Obviously, the representation of the handles will be an image, but there is a series of information pertaining to the handle. Let's see how we have structured them. The handle dimension, the handle's 3D file. Here we have used the X files. We may indifferently use 3D Studio, X, or even SKP. The handle orientation, for the knob, it doesn't matter. The handle can be horizontal or vertical, 1 or 2. A number of holes and distance between them. The machine or work cycle program code. In this case, we have put an item code that will be needed later for the generator of the handle and also for the handle price list. Colors, the distance that the handle must have from the edge of the door, which may obviously vary between handles. This is an example, and we'll concentrate on a particular topic. When we design a variant, we design the code for each element of the variant, description, and a series of information that are variable and that we may carry over to any part of the rule, using formulas that we have already seen and that we will see again ahead. It's useful to know for maintenance purposes that entering the setup and backup icon, we may find a few variants and obtain a backup of everything that we have done in the ASCII file. We may save this ASCII file. As a matter of fact, we have done it inside the tutorial folder, and we may also perform maintenance from here. Once this has been done, it would be sufficient to close the file and the program will re-import the modified variants. This will be the same for any kind of product. Therefore, for the colors or the materials, for the typologies, for the shapes, and so on, we may easily use this utility to import and export data. At this point, let's choose the tutorial model, select the base, and with Ctrl E, enter in the editing of the rule of this base. Now, this is the screen where we edit the rule. Let's explain parts of it. In type, for the rule, we should distinguish the type of element to which the rule corresponds. We haven't yet set the kind of elements, but we will do it later on. The description is for control, the same for the comments, and the same for the code. The positioning mode, we will see it on rules which are a little particular, which means that the rule has a default behavior. Some are always set on the floor and others are positioned in different places. The kind of link may be defined later on. The same for the divider structure, which we will deal with separately. To sum up, the header contains information that specializes the rule, but not required for normal use. On the right, we see the minimum and maximum dimensions that the rule will have. These are the defaults, which means that any size force beyond these dimensions will not be taken in consideration. We may also insert positions and fixed dimensions. There are other techniques to set dimensions and restrictions, and this is not the most important. Here we have the variants, which are the questions that we will make on the rule. Let's consider each one of the various columns. The first shows if it's blocked or not. Normally it's not, because the variant is blocked anyway. In the second, we have the code of the variant. Here we have the variant typo, of which we have already browsed through its list previously. Now let's do it more in depth. The variante variant is the most important of the generic type to use. The valore fisso, fixed value, is a variant that is only for visualization purposes, and it's set at a value that can't be changed. The sagoma shape is a variant which opens a two-dimensional CAD that allows to design an element from a shape. Various two-dimensional CADs are linkable, all our products, and we must choose which one of these to use. The groupo is a grouping of variants, and it's used to not describe every time the list of all of the variants. The adjunta add-on is a particular kind of group that may be added on inside the rule, and which corresponds to a rule automatically created with other elements that will add on. The selezione multipla multiple selection variant allows to choose more than one value. It's normally used for the accessories. The variante libero, free, the operator can write the result of the same variant. It's essentially a text. The misura size variant shows the size that must be used. For the misura and libere variants, their values are set here for minimum and maximum. The no C and C no variants respectively show some Boolean variants that allow to set a default to no for no or C for yes. The variant nascosta hidden is not made visible, which means that it's the code in charge of its management. And we'll see that this is particularly useful when we want to interface the variants and memorize the information that are visible to the operator. The selezione SQL, selection on SQL, is a particular variant which allows to access the SQL. This kind of variant isn't used when the catalog is working on the light version, which doesn't have direct access to the database. The separatore, separator, is used to subdivide the variance groups. The selezione da tabelle, select from tables, is a variant used very seldom, but we usually find it on the header variants. The SQL limitations apply. Colore, font, file, immagine, and editor are particular variants that allow to access Windows standard interfaces. The default variant is particular when it's about setting defaults values. We will use it to establish the thickness or general parameters. The D class variant usually represents a program extension. Actually, we can write an extension, a completely separated program, and link it to a variant through an interface. We'll see how to create an interface later on in this tutorial. The cat gem variant is not a variant. It's required to inherit the data from the management system whenever they are present in these last variants. The data date variant allows to input the date. These are particular variants, and we won't describe them in detail at the moment. Moving on to the other columns, each variant may have an alias. We have seen that it's better to write the alias directly into the variants, but we may also set it in each single rule. The validity is a formula which states if the variant is true or false. If this formula exists, the variant will be shown or it won't be shown. The description substitutes the variant standard description used for the free type variants or for other things, and usually it's inherited from the variant. The code column is a formula that states column per column if the option is valid. This is a filter on all of the set options through codes. Therefore, it is quite important. The control are the parameters for the variant class when the D class is used. We have already covered values, minimum and maximum. Color 1 and color 2 are different representations for a different video presentation. The video visible is not a certification. It simply states that if we want to keep the variant hidden or visible. The variant exists anyway and it works regularly. This long tutorial was to explain what's contained in the variants, and so here we have seen that in the variants we have inserted in the rule in this order: structure, front, plinth, top, colors, and materials. Here we have inserted some formulas of validity, always linked to the content of previous variants. It's important to set the formulas of validity using dimensions or the variance content that must be on the list. Formulas that uses variance to be set later on may not be used. Once understood how the question system works, we can see that every variant inserted allows to open a window like this one, like this standard one. Code description. For the colors, the framework we have previously inserted shows us this kind of window. Not having used variant classes at the moment, we are linked to these two visualization systems. It's also interesting that if we set the base open or the front open, some variants disappear. The same thing if we place it without a top, the top variant disappears. If I give instruction to not use the plinth variant disappears. To insert a separator, which could be ma materials, that would eventually allow to separate the variants on this page. In any case, it's possible to give a minor or major importance to a particular variant, inserting in it a color or a different formula. We have terminated with this first part of the variant presentation. Therefore, at this point, we would have available a series of variables linked to the rule. It's possible to do a dump of these variables in any moment through the functions dump regula or variables dump. The rule dump gives me the list of variables that we have used. The dump of the variables gives me the list of variables that I have available. We may also see how there is another set of variants that we haven't defined. We know the variance dimensions. We will see later the corrections of the variance of the dimensions, the opening variants, but actually there are other that may show particular situations. For example, pressing these buttons, which are part of the interface, will create and enable the variants that we may see in this dump. Different variants are lato ADX, lato ASX, lato BDX, lato BSX, lato DX, lato XX, open. Obviously, it's in Italian because this program was written in this language. The meaning that may be independently given to these variants by the interface is customizable through the rule. Inside the rule, we could also define how to do it or if to show a few or all of these variants. To verify what we have done so far, let's insert something in the Graphica group to verify what we have done up to now. We have inserted a few instructions, defined a variable which we have named XX, and perform the dump of all of the variables and create a string. Then we set the dimensions, the structure type, the front type, to know how we have inserted inside the variable the declaration of other variables. The character backslash at the end of the line shows that a variable is written on different lines, allowing to better arrange the code. In the graphic for the line separation, we use the pipe character. Here we have made it more simple. We have the plinth type, the color, even if the plinth is not present. Otherwise, it would be required to do as in the front case, where we have practically inserted a condition, and based on this, we will complete the variable. Notice how things are added to the variable using the redefinition of the variable XX as contained in it, and plus something else that defines its content. At the end, all of this, we use a message box. Since we want some carriage returns and the pipe is the character used, which we have substituted with the toCrlf function to the very same variable. This is a rule used to present a simple description of the content of the selected variables. Let's see it in practice. When we modify the content of a variable, the content of the variable is shown. In this case, oven. In another case, no top, as we have seen. The color of the top is anyway quoted as a description, even if it's not there. Changing the plinth type is shown on the materials, and changing the color of one of these, we can carry over the color inside the element in hand. What we have done so far was to create new variants, linking the variants to a basic rule, and use the answer of the variables that are used inside the evaluation groups, in particular in the group and graphic group. At this point, we can move on to the next phase, that is to create the graphic part of the rule.